This is the Bigger Pockets Podcast, show 338.
You're listening to Bigger Pockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.
What's going on, everyone? This is Brandon, host of the Bigger Pockets Podcast, here with the co-host, the David Green. What's up, buddy?
Not much, man. Just another beautiful day in California, slanging homes and building wealth. How's it going over there?
It's good. I woke up this morning, grabbed my phone, got a text message from a guy named David Green, standing in front of a miror.
I knew you were going to do this.
Guns, these guns,
I knew this was coming.
I mean, these things are illegal in 40 states. You're looking good, buddy.
I'm a police officer, so we can get access to permits that other people can't get. Thank goodness. Yeah. So for those who don't know and don't think that I just wake up in the morning and send gym pictures to everyone I know, Brandon and I have recently discussed how he started lifting weights, which I think is awesome because Brandon's lost a ton of weight. He did a triathlon with like 8 weeks of preparation. He's kind of insane. It makes no sense when you look at this man, the kind of athletic specimen that he really is. So now that he's interested in lifting weights, I'm like, dude, now I'm going to move to Hawaii so that we can work out all the time. This is going to be another element, another dimension to our friendship, which, side note, we talk about three-dimensional investing in today's show, which is really cool. We do. So now I'm trying to encourage him, like, look, you could have this. If you keep going, you too could look like me.
Oh, wow. Someday. That is funny. Anyway, no, you got some guns. That's good. Speaking of today's show, we do talk a lot about something that I call 3D real estate investing. It basically is this idea of being able to find deals. Okay, not find deals, but make deals. We talk about this all the time. About today's market, you don't find deals, you got to make deals. And our guest today is James Dainard, and this guy is probably one of the most, if not the most creative 3D make a deal happen investors we've ever had on the show. Like it's like story after story of where he took deals. In fact, he even said at one point, 60% of his deals come from the MLS. Yet he's able to turn these massive profits. I mean, like one of his stories talked about how he made over $1 million on a house flip on a deal, like on his own house flip, on a deal that like he didn't even like, the house was on the market for like a year and he bought it off the MLS after being on the market for a year and he still made $1 million on it, which is crazy. He's bought like a 60-room house. And I use house with like the quotes on both sides of my head. A 60-room house. He talked about how he turned that into this cash flow machine. How he went from like being a waiter to flipping over 100 houses every year, and how they built up a portfolio. How he's built his portfolio to over 200 units now, rental units. Really, really good stuff. Again, one of the most creative investors. You guys are going to love this, even if you're just getting started or if you've got 100 deals you've done. Like this guy is somebody to listen to. So you're going to love this show. But before we actually get to the interview with James, let's get to today's quick tip. All right, today's quick tip, nice and simple and easy. Our guest today, James, is actually this is not why we chose him for the episode, but he's a premium member on Bigger Pockets. You know, we have our free members and we have our pro members. We now have a new membership called premium members. And there's a lot of benefits for if you are a real estate agent, a lender, a hard money lender, a seasoned real estate investor doing a lot of deals. Premium might be really, really good for you, especially, again, if you're a vendor of some kind on Bigger Pockets. And there's a thread in the forums where one of our awesome colleagues, Vivian, who works at Bigger Pockets, she's product manager, she breaks down exactly what that is and answers all the questions about it. And we will link to that in the show notes. And now, without further ado, leave us ratings, reviews in iTunes. We say that every single week, or Stitcher or Google Play, wherever you listen to the show. If you're watching this on YouTube, give the thumbs up. Anytime you're watching a YouTube video, Bigger Pockets, give that thumbs up. It tells the Google algorithm that it's a good video and they'll show it to more people. If you're not following us on YouTube, do that as well. YouTube.com/BiggerPockets. And
this show is going to blow your mind. This is one of the most impressive people we've ever talked to, in my opinion.
Be prepared.
He is Gordon Ramsay, right? Like he's taking all of the same ingredients that any of us have access to, but he's putting them together in ways that you've never thought of before and making gourmet dishes that turn into millions of dollars. Any excuse you've ever had in real estate is about to get completely blown out of the water when you see the way that this guy moves pieces around to make deals work.
Yeah, he's like Gordon Ramsay, but nicer. He's like the nice version.
Way nicer.
Yeah, he's like super cool.
Right.
All right. Well, with that, enough buildup of the show. It's time to get to the show. Let's hear from today's interview with James Dainard. All right, James, welcome to the BiggerPockets podcast, man. Good to have you here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so let's go through your story. I know you do a lot of cool stuff up there in the Seattle area. When we were hanging out at Tarl's event there, I just kept hearing really good things about you. So I'm kind of excited to kind of dig into your story. So why don't we go? What did you do before real estate, and then kind of walk us in that journey going from not real estate to your first deal?
So what I did prior to real estate is I was actually going to college at University of Washington in the business school, and I was actually serving burgers at Red Robin,
Nice.
kind of making tips, paying for school. And my roommate at the time actually went to work for an investment company, going out and knocking on people's foreclosure doors. And so I figured as a senior in college, I needed to learn really good sales experience. And the best way to do that is to go bang on people's doors that don't want to talk to me.
Yeah.
And so for my senior year of college, I would actually go knock doors 3 days a week and try to find them an opportunity to buy. And so that they would just give me a stack of leads. I had no training on real estate whatsoever. And I would go out and knock on people's foreclosure doors or just other kind of sellers and chat with them and try to get them to sell. Honestly, I was terrible at the job in the first year. I made $0. Like I knocked on probably
balling.
I was just balling. I was losing my gas money every month. I go to Red Robin, I work on tips, get my tips, put it in my car, go out and knock on a door and get the door slammed in my face. And then, once I graduated college, I was like, I kind of like this. Real estate really interests me. I was seeing people making a lot of money flipping houses and buying and holding properties and buying apartment buildings. And so I gave it like a 6-month commitment after college to work. Basically, I was working 6 days a week, knocking doors to try to generate some deals. And all of a sudden, the lights just turned on. I spent a ton of time researching the market, what to do, what a HUD was, what a loan was, because I had no training whatsoever. And I just kind of fell in love with it after 6 months. And it went from making zero money to all of a sudden I was getting some checks for like $5-6 grand from this company that would pay me to find the deal. And for a senior out of college, that was a lot of money. And it just kind of got me hooked.
So tell me, what does that look like for those people who are listening to this and maybe saying like, what were you saying to these people? You're knocking on their doors, foreclosures. You got to walk through like, what was the purpose? What were you doing? And then what were you saying to get them to sell you their house?
So the purpose was I was working for an investment company at a Bellevue, Washington, which is a submarket in Seattle. And, their purpose was they had a lot of investors wanting to buy rental property or flip properties, and they just needed leads. And so they would hire guys like me to go knock on the door. And, back then it was pretty funny because I consider I look pretty young now. I'm 35, but I looked really young at 22. And so I'd be knocking on these people's doors and they'd be like, what are you selling? And they'd think I'd be selling newspapers or something. And so I would just knock on I even had earrings in too. So I was like really young, and I'd knock on the door and I would just start it off with a conversation of, I came by to talk to you about your mortgage and I have some people interested in buying your property. It was just kept it very simple. And actually, I went out with a couple of the owners of that company, and they're pretty high energy, very salesy guys. And that's just not really my thing. I'm kind of more analytics and get to know people. Like in restaurants, you learn how to take care of people and you learn how to serve them. And so I kind of just, I remember for the first 9 months, I made no money, couldn't get in the door. And then randomly I talked to my mom and she said, well, Jimmy, just be yourself. And literally, so I would just go out there and just talk to people. Like instead of going out with a mission to go get their house, it was just more to chat with people and just have a friendly conversation. And then from there, I would, get in the door and kind of talk to them about numbers on the house.
Well, it's amazing how so many people, especially I see this with wholesalers a lot, people who are, jumping into wholesaling or even like flipping their door knocking, whatever. They think that they got to be like the person they heard on the podcast, or they got to be somebody else because the guru they look up to or the podcaster they look up to or whatever is a certain way. So they think they got to put on this like act like that person. But I love that you said that. Just be yourself. Like your mom was 100% right. Like, because people can see through that fakeness all day long.
Yeah, so if you're having problems, talk to your mom first.
Yeah, there you go.
Don't worry about the guru, talk to your mom. And it's really just when you're out wholesaling and you're talking to people, it's just getting to know them, getting to know their situation and their what's their need for selling. And, sometimes sellers don't know what their actual need is. And so, a lot of times when I get to a situation, it might just be that they have 2-3 kids in a house that's way too small and it's not that nice. And, I kind of went in with an approach to help them get him into a better living situation. And by doing that, that actually, I was focused more on their solution rather than buying the house. And then that just started bringing me a ton of properties. And so like I created, at 23, I created this little business for, I go out, I get them in credit repair, I line up movers, I find them a new rental property. And what that did is it just got me a lot of deal flow. And then from there, I started learning how to actually analyze the deals from there.
That's cool. So go ahead, David.
I was going to ask,
that's awesome.
How did you go from helping this company to doing your own first deal?
Yeah.
So, part of working there is they would, basically 1 out of 10 contracts, they would allow us to purchase the property. And so it was kind of like an incentive for the employees, and even with my employees today, I have that same incentive. If I feel like employees that are passionate about real estate want to buy real estate. And so they were getting me involved. And so, my goal at 23, I was seeing all these guys making tons of money. I was like, I want to be that guy. And, and so they gave me an option, basically on my 10th contract, I was able to start picking out the one that I wanted.
That's cool.
So
I've never heard that before from a company, but I really love that as well. Because it gives the person who's working for you something to look forward to. Hey, when I do 10 deals, that way also it's not like, I mean, like I've worried in the past about hiring, wholesalers or people to work with me. Like, what if they just go steal the first deal or second deal? Did they have a way to prevent that? And then, like after the 10th deal, did you get to pick any deal, or was there a certain, like it was just number 10?
It was after our 10th deal. I got to pick any deal that I found after that. And I still had to pay the company their fee, their standard fee, which, that's part of the job. And, and I think with them, a lot of the guys actually, so it was kind of weird. I was like this 23-year-old guy, and then all the other sales guys were like 35, 40, and 50 years old. And so I was the young guy in the group, but I was also the guy working the most. I was working like 60 hours a week, and I was after a year in, I was doing 2 to 3 times more deals than everybody else. And so they're like, who's this young kid? But none of the older guys, they were focused more on the paycheck than they were about buying real estate. So, besides my business partner, we were the only 2 guys in the company actually taking the employee option, which was kind of crazy to us. Like, because, for me, real estate's about building wealth, not just making income. And, you can do both, but at the same time, if you just rely on checks, you're going to run out of checks at some point. Yeah. And so, my goal was not to just get involved and make a bunch of checks. It was that I want to build wealth. And so my first goal was to buy my own property, which happened about 11 months into the project, or about a year into working there.
So let's talk about that first property. What was that?
So it was in BRRRRing, Washington, which is a sub-market of Seattle. It's about 10 miles or 5-10 miles south of Seattle, the core area. And it actually, the reason I picked it was a 2001 built townhome. It was a townhome style, really good condition, and needed carpet and paint. And at 23, I just knew I really didn't know how to renovate a property. And that was not my skill set. My skill set was finding the deal. And so I wanted to find something low maintenance that wasn't going to distract me from my daily duties of working. And so I found this newer building. It was, I paid $176 for it. At the time, it was worth $245. So it had that equity position that I needed, because also what I was looking for was something with at least a 20% equity position or discount, because I wanted to, at 23, I didn't have a whole lot of money either. So I what I had to do was line up financing for a first and a second with somebody so I could refinance them out of the deal. And so I was looking for something that didn't need a lot of work, that I could refinance quickly. They had a 20% equity position. And, for me, I'm a firm believer, if you're a newer investor, don't bite off more than you can chew. So it was a really good property for me to just start with. And it cash flowed me about $250 a month too. So it was just kind of a win for me.
Okay. So it was a rental property. How did you finance it then? Did you say that?
Yeah. So how I financed it, I actually did a first mortgage with a hard money lender around town. And then I got one of our investor clients that liked me from finding them deals. What I did is I did a really good in-depth analysis of the property to make sure he knew the equity position was there. And then I got fully pre-qualified for a refinance with 100% commitment from the lender. And so I went to him and said, hey, can you do me a solid? I'll pay you. I paid him 12% interest, and he did my second mortgage for me. And
Cool.
then he felt comfortable because I was all prepared. And, so I was in and out of the loans. I was only in hard money for 2 months because it didn't need very much work. So,
Wow.
And got him refinanced. And that was my first deal. And then from there, I actually took a HELOC out on the equity to then be able to purchase my next property. So I used that 20% to get me into the next few deals from there.
That's cool. All right. So you basically the way we talk about today, right, is BRRRRing. You bought it. It didn't sound like it needed that much of a rehab, but you bought it, rehabbed it, refinanced it, paid off the hard money lender and the private lender, which is a phenomenal strategy, by the way. And then now you own this rental property. It's cash flowing. And because you had still equity in it, you were able to tap into that equity using a home equity line of credit and go buy something else. Did I sum that up good?
Yeah. And so what I did is I didn't want to over finance the deal. And so the HELOC gave me that, instead of having to get a private money lender at that point, it gave me an additional about 40 grand with bank financing to be my next down payment. So then my goal of my next purchase was to find something very similar kind of situation with a 20% equity or more. And then that I only had to put $40,000 down. So I had to find something that up with a purchase of less than 200 grand.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
So,
cool.
But yeah, the leverage put me into a whole nother position. But that's why buying that first deal is so important, to get a good equity spread, because you can maximize off that and get into and start building your portfolio.
Yeah. Yeah. So I love that. I'm a big believer in buying stuff that you can build that equity right away. And again, how do you balance though? I'm curious, between somebody who's just getting started, they're brand new, they're looking for their first deal, buying a deal that has tons of equity, and just buying something to get their foot in the door. If you're talking to a new investor, how do you typically advise them? Like, how good of a deal should they go for their first deal? And where's that line between just getting something done?
What I always tell people, and this is the same thing I do myself, is what kind of capital, like as an investor, I always have a certain amount of money set aside for my investing in long-term holds, whether it's what for me, like, because I'm also a big flipper. And so I flip about 100 homes a year. And what I do is I take 30% of that profit off the flips and I allocate it for my buy and hold.
Oh, cool.
And so, because that's, like we were saying, money comes and goes. And for me, if I take 30% aside, it's going to build my wealth, not just my income. And so, for a newer investor, I always tell them, hey, the first thing you want to do is find out how much money you have to work with. And then from there, build the plan off of it. And if you only have 10, 20 grand, that's okay. You just have to start setting your plan accordingly to what you can do with that 10,000. If when I'm talking to an investor, if I only have 10,000 I want to put to work, I might look at cheaper submarkets out of Seattle, because you can still get a good buy and hold and get good cash flow off it and put it to work. Because sometimes just getting your first deal done is the most important thing, because you get to learn your processes, you get to learn your strengths and weaknesses, and then just don't buy any deal that crosses your plate that's a big discount deal, because if you're also new, you might not have that construction background. For me, like I kept all with condos at first because they were easy for me to do. And then once I started flipping a lot of homes, it gave me that skill set to buy these deeper discounted properties and then get them, refinanced and pull out cash and then reinvest the cash. And so, I kind of took it in steps. So my first 4 buy and holds were all condos. And, as long as they were good deals on the condo and I believed in the market and the rents were very consistent, like that was a good way for me to go. Plus, as a landlord, I kind of like the condos to handle all the exterior maintenance.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to have to deal with all the maintenance and the wear and tear because I didn't have the skill set to do it now. Nowadays, I don't really buy condos because I do have that skill set, but it's a very good starting way. Or, sometimes buying a newer built house is good too, just because, as you're learning all your maintenance kind of issues.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. I've always been nervous about condos, but then I look at them. I got a buddy out here in Hawaii. His name's Greg, and Greg buys condos up in near the airport area. Not the greatest neighborhood, not the greatest complex, pretty low income, but the guy's picking up condos for significantly cheaper than the average thing in Hawaii, and he's making cash flow I should get Greg on the show sometime, because it's stupid good cash flow on these properties that are Section 8. like lower end condos. But when he explains it to me, he's like, look, they take care of all the exterior maintenance. They take care of all the building itself. I go in, he completely renovates these condos when he gets them, which doesn't cost that much money because they're little 1-bedroom, like cement boxes essentially. And the guy's just making a killing off it. So anyway, I was always scared of condos, but I never got into them. But it can be a fantastic way to get started. Yeah, you're probably not going to make, you're not going to scale necessarily condos to thousands of units. Some people do, I suppose, but yeah, not a bad idea to get started.
Yeah, and because condos do have risk, you want to make sure the HOA certs are reserves because that can really affect your cash flow. Like one condo, I got hit with a $9,000 assessment. I wasn't really. And
that's the part no one talks about. Is we all know there's an HOA fee every month, but you can work that into your numbers. What you can't work in is when a tree fell on the roof and there's no money in our fund, so everybody's got to kick in $8,000 to pay for a new roof. And that goes like 2 years of your cash flow is gone for something you couldn't control.
Yeah, and that is, I mean, the one thing is the maintenance is nice because they take care of it. But then again, you also have HOA people who are not usually investors hiring out the work. And that was my biggest problem. Like, you guys just spent, I remember I had that assessment. It was for a fence and a roof. And they spent a ridiculous amount of money on fences, and I was like, "I'm not okay with it." It's
like when the government tries to take over and run a project.
Yes, exactly.
There's like no motivation to do it cheaply, and you're like, "This is 7 times what I would pay for that same fence," and they're like, "Yeah, well, that's HOA."
And I can't stand wasted budgets. It drives me nuts. So,
all right, so let's go. You mentioned a second ago something that was kind of shocking. You said I flip around 100 houses a year. Is that what you said?
Yeah, about 100.
Okay, so I want to know, how did you go from, first of all, how do you go from the guy who buys a condo and then buys a second one to I flip 100 houses a year? I mean, can you walk us through in like a minute? Like, how did you go through that transformation?
Yeah, well, I'm just a little crazy and I like to work too much, but and I think I'd like to torture myself. But so I got involved in real estate in 2005 and 6. And then I started my business in 2008 on my own. That was right when the market just fell off a cliff. And so during that time, we were starting from scratch. Back then, investors didn't want to touch you could just give someone for free and they would not want it. They're like, "Oh, real estate? I don't want it." Yeah. And so what I started doing is as a wholesaler, we'd find these really good deals back then because, again, even sellers were just giving away their properties. But no one wanted to buy them that much in like 2008, 9, and 10. And so, what we did is we kind of became the buyers. And, for us, it was about, because again, wholesaling wasn't that profitable either. You get a really good deal and maybe you get $5,000 out of it. Yep. And so we decided to, we got lined up with a couple different lenders to finance us. And we started with just kind of cosmetic flips where we would actually do them a little bit nicer than everything else, like add in the extra tile, the granite, and be very thrifty about how we would buy these things. And also we would factor they'd be worth 10 to 20% less by the time we were done with them. And so what it did is we started with 1 to 2 and we're like, okay, well, we're making $20,000 a house. And this is something we can live off of because wholesaling was really low. Because, a lot about real estate is just adapting to the market. And you got to put together your systems with whatever's going on in the current market conditions. And so for us, because no one was really buying, it allows us to get some really good deals out there. And then we just started flipping slowly and kind of building our systems and, went from doing like 10 the first year. And then we started doing 20. And then by the time the market started heating up in 2013 and 14, we had already started, we kind of saw the trend and we went heavy in and started doing about 40 to 50 houses at a time with a big team. And then we saw all the upside in appreciation. And so, like right now I'm not flipping, I have been doing about 100 a year. This year I'll probably do 50 because I'm just trying to be more strategic with the market conditions. And, but yeah, it's just hard work and no one wanted to buy it. So we just took the risk and bought it ourselves. That's
amazing. I love that story because people listen to the show. A lot of them are on their first deal, their first condo, their second, their third, their fourth. And so I'd like people to know, like, it doesn't take 20 or 30 years to scale up to a sizable business. Like you just, put in the work, like constantly learning from your mistakes, figuring out what you can do better next time. And having that vision, I guess, just kind of moves you forward, which is awesome. Now you said we, who is we? Like you have a partner involved in this or somewhat, right?
Yeah, my partner Will Heaton. So we've been
Yep.
partners since. I mean, we were actually roommates when we started in college. Or
Oh,
no,
nice.
he's 6 years old. He's older than me. He's 6 years older. But me and him are roommates when he started working at this foreclosure company. He's been a sales guy for a long time, and then so we've been partners since day one in real estate together, and we haven't shifted since. And we own all our business together. We own all of our rentals together, except for I do own a few of my own personal rentals that I'm always trading around. But yeah, we're just 50-50 partners.
That's cool. So let's talk about that for a minute. What made you want to partner with him? Like what made him a good partner? And kind of maybe relate that to people listening to the show. How can they find a good partner? Like, I mean, obviously it's been good for you guys. You've been blown up. What made that so good?
The biggest thing I've had a lot of partnerships over the years, and, some have worked really well and some have not worked that well. And, having a partner, my biggest thing is making sure that your core values are on the same page, right? And that's, it starts with integrity. It starts with honesty, and then also starts with work ethic. Like everyone's got to be on the same work ethic page. And then Will and I, we just had a passion for not just, again, going out and making checks. We wanted to build wealth. And, that's been our focus is to, we went from, I think, or probably in 2009 was the first year we bought our properties together. And, we started with a couple, and now we're up to over 250 doors. And so that's because me and him are on the same vision, the same line, that we want to build a long-term wealth portfolio of real estate. And so as long as our core values and core investing principles stay together, then we've been able to be really good partners. I mean, we probably had only like 6 major issues, like confrontation, like big discrepancies in how we decide things in the last 12 years. So it's very, very rare. We're just on the same page.
That's
okay.
Cool.
So of these 250 doors, what are they made up of? Are they single family, multifamilies, mobile home parks?
They're a little bit of everything, but we have probably about 10 single family properties. For us, we hold single family properties if they have upside with zoning, or, some properties, we bought them right in 2008 and they're really cheap, but they're on very large pieces of land. In some submarkets in Seattle. So we feel like the next building boom is when we'll probably develop those and sell those lots off or build on them, but not this building boom. And then we have a lot of rooming houses where we take single family houses and we turn them into 8 and 16 unit rooms next to University of Washington, any kind of core school. We're actually doing one where we're doing a 60 rooming house in Capitol Hill right now, where we're taking an art building and put 60 doors in. It's a very complex project.
Yeah.
And then we have a lot of duplexes and fourplexes too with, and we like things with extra zoning, they have L zoned and they can be, development down the road.
Let's talk about this rooming house thing. This blows my mind. 60 like rooms for students. Is that?
Yeah,
crazy.
60. Yeah. It's, in Seattle, affordability is such an issue. And so, we bought this historical building in Cap Hill. It's an art house. And, one of the things about Seattle is they want to preserve these kind of structures. And it was kind of like this, it was more a place for vagrants, really, but they called it the art house. And, and so when we went to them with this proposal, we were a little worried about it because, they don't, Seattle does like to, they'll stomp on some development because they want to keep the core neighborhood together.
Yeah.
But the fact that we're rolling out affordable housing, they worked with us so easy. It was so, because there's so much demand for it. They worked with us on all different angles. And so, these rooms, what people need is a place to live and they want a nice place. And so these rooming houses we actually strip them all the way down to the studs, make them really nice, all nice kitchens, all nice flooring, solid doors, and they can live there for $999 a month. And so with Seattle and kind of the hipster movement, people like shared living. There's WeWork and co-living, and they like it. And so what it really does, though, it takes a normal deal and you can hyper accelerate the return by putting the right plan together. And so that's why we came up with these rooming houses.
This is fascinating to me. So is there like a common area? It's almost like a giant dorm, but it's but it's not like a dorm. It's like like
a hostel?
It's almost like a hostel. That kind of the feel it has.
Yeah, so this one's a little bit more complex. Like I'm doing another one too next to University of Washington, where I'm taking a triplex that's owned SF 5000, but it's grandfathered in. and I'm turning that into, it's a duplex, excuse me, and I'm turning it into 16 rooms rather than a duplex. And so with these rooming houses, what we do is we do like a really big kitchen, chef style kitchen with a big living area, flex area. And so each floor usually has its own little, the main floor will have a huge kitchen, and then each floor has a little sub kitchen with a washer dryer area. And then what typically we'll do is like in maybe 1/3 of the units, we'll actually plumb in little small wet bars too for them. And those might go for like $1,100 a month instead of $999 to give them a little extra space.
Okay, yeah.
But people really, most of what we get is, a lot of them are actually, to be honest, like they're foreign students coming over. They kind of mind their own business. They want a nice, clean place to live. And, and that's why we do them to like high-end new construction quality. So they get a really good place and comfortable place to live. And people kind of mind their own business. And if they have their own space, they're good with it. We do try to get in, if we have 16 rooms, we're trying to get in like 10 bathrooms. Because bathrooms are a big deal. So, it's usually like 2 rooms per bathroom, 2 to 3 rooms. And then some will have their own in-suite bathrooms that we'll charge a little bit more for.
Okay. Again, this just blows my mind. I love this idea. So does the government, because it is low income housing and they need housing for students and stuff. So they're okay with, like, they work with you on this. They work with the zoning on this. Is that how do you get through that? So in neighborhoods and all that?
How the zoning works in Seattle is you can put in, if you have an SF 5000 property, you can actually put in 8 bedrooms there.
Okay.
You can't do more than 8 at that point. So really, when you're picking these, you could go get a 6,000 square foot building, but you're only still going to get 8 bedrooms. So there's kind of this sweet spot with the size of building that you can get. So that's we learned that in the kind of downturn is we were actually looking at a house next to University of Washington. And it wasn't a good enough deal for a flip, and it didn't really pencil as a rental, but we knew it was $390 next to the UW. And at the time, again, it wasn't that good of a deal, but we saw potential. We were like, this $390 next to UW, this is a good buy. And so actually Will, my partner, came up with the idea, and he's like, hey, there's this rooming house thing. Let me dig into this. And then so we took this, we paid $360 for it. We put $250,000 into the building and made it really nice. And it was our first one, so we had a little bit of inefficiencies on our construction. We made it a little too nice, went a little too in depth, but that thing brings in now $9,000 a month in rent. And so our cash on cash return is astronomical. Whereas every other investor, and this was a property just sitting on the market, no one wanted it. And we just kept looking at it. We're like, this is a good piece of property. And it was also next to a freeway too. So like the flippers didn't want it. The rental people didn't like it. The zone SF 5000. And then since then, so now, we're into it like $600,000. Brings in $9,000 a month, which is just a ridiculous amount for a poor neighborhood in Seattle. And then since then, the zoning's changed, and now we can actually build. It got upzoned because when we do look at these buy and holds, we're also looking at path of progress, like what's going on in the neighborhoods, and that's why we liked this one. It seemed more commercial than residential. So they upzoned it, and now we can actually build 2 houses in the backyard too. And
that's cool.
And so, if you put the right strategy together and not just overlook the just one sitting there that everyone's overlooking, then, you can get something that's a gold mine.
Yeah. Such a good tip. There are ways. Again, real estate, I like to say this a lot. Real estate is not 2-dimensional. It's 3-dimensional. Like a lot of people look at a deal and they're like, well, they're asking $360 or $390 or whatever, they're asking this price. I could rent it out for this much. Doesn't make sense. And they move on. But you guys definitely have shown how you're like, well, what if we did this? And what if we turned it into this? And what if we did that? It's like a multi-dimensional project. And when you start thinking that way in real estate deals, like to use a cliche, like the world's your oyster, right? There's a lot, not that every deal is going to work out, but the number of potential properties out there, the sky's the limit. There's so much out there if you just learn to think 3-dimensional like that. Now, is that something you just get over time, or like how did you learn to start thinking more creatively like that?
I think the credit actually goes to our flipping processes, because we got, a lot of, even back in the day, we would buy these small houses and carve them up into we'd take out a 950 square foot house and turn it into a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, affordable product. And so we got really used to putting together like value engineered design. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh, well, if we can rent these out for 8 bedrooms legally, we can put our same flip process into our rentals. And, because a lot of times people stay clear from the major fixtures in the rentals, and I don't blame them. They're a lot of work. You get dead time on your money, for a year, you're out, you're not making income. But if you put the right strategy together and you have the right systems, you can really maximize out these returns. And the flipping really benefited us because we know construction, we know how to design things, we know how to get the permit pushed through, and we know how to get the inspections done. And so it's been a huge, flipping is good for income and maybe not for long. I mean, it helps long-term wealth by building your capital, but it also gives you very good systems and tools because flipping is not easy. So the more you learn on it, the more tools you have for your rental portfolio.
So let's talk about the construction stuff because that is something that scares a lot of people. Yeah. Well, first of all, when you're first, not you necessarily, but when people are first getting into it, do you have any advice on how they can better estimate the cost of a rehab? Like when they're brand new, like how did you do it, or how do you know newbies can do that?
Yeah, construction is really tough because I think a lot of investors, and a lot of people I work with, they do this cat and mouse game with them. Like they're like, oh, my budget's 100, so I'm going to tell the guy 90, and then he's going to come at 140, and then we're going to try to meet in the middle without really going through and logically breaking it down. And so, what I've done is I've created a spreadsheet for my whole team to use that breaks down square footages, and then it breaks down install rates and material rates. And the best thing an investor can do is find out what a normal install rate is per item, because a lot of people don't even know that. Like an electrician should charge you $25 a fixture to install that fixture. That's a pretty normal rate. On the high side, it's $50. And so like when these, so getting to know those things, like if I break down electrical, I know a panel is $1,500 in Seattle. That's a normal rate. A fixture's $25. Running wires, $3 a square foot. So I get all these numbers from the electricians, compile it, and then when they give me a high bid, I then just work them backwards and say, okay, well, how much are you charging me for the panel? How much are you charging me to run wire? And you just have to really know your install rates. And, but the whole back and forth thing with the contractor is not a good method because it just allows for massive amounts of change orders. And so you really want to get the install rates and everything figured out and working with a really good team that can help you with that.
That's great. Yeah.
What I love about what you just said was that you don't just, everybody asks, how do you calculate rehab costs? Like it's something that we can just say, well, here's a cheat sheet. Every contractor is going to charge the same thing. It's so complicated to explain to people how that works that there is never going to be an easy way. You have to do exactly what you just said. How much is it going to cost you to do the wiring? Why does it cost that much? How does a contractor look at it? Does he look at square feet? Does he look at how many boxes he's going to put in? They have a method or a metric that they use, and you're asking the right questions so that you can understand it from their perspective. And I tell people that all the time when they're saying, well, how do I know what the ARV is going to be? Well, do you know what an an appraiser's method is when they look at a property, how they come up with what the price is? Because if you see it from an appraiser standpoint, you can get a really good idea what your ARV is going to be. If you know how a contractor looks at a home, how they bid it, how they price it, you can get a really good idea. You're doing that really good, James. Like everything that you've said is you look at a problem. All right, I want to buy that house, but it costs too much money. How could I chop it up into little pieces and rent them all out to make that work? What would I need to know in order to do that? And you've just systematically broke this down into smaller pieces that then it's very easy for your brain to look at that problem and say, I can make this work or not.
Yeah, and then I always work backwards off the issue.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I dictate where the contractor get their materials from, and I know that pricing. So like I'm saying, hey, you're going to get this floor from this area or this supplier. It's $1.65 for the materials, and an average install rate is $1.50 to install this. And so when they give me a high quote, I can ask them a logical question, and if they can't answer it, they'll usually come down, or they're just not the right guy and they don't know how to estimate something regardless. And so at that point, you don't want to hire them anyways.
Isn't that 100 times better than just living in fear of, I hope my contractor is not ripping me off, or I don't want to do this at all because a contractor might rip me off? Like that's what Brandon and I see all the time is, well, I don't know. What if they're taking advantage of me? But what you just said is, well, I know the materials are $1.65 a square foot. I know the install rate's $1.50 a square foot. So it should be a little over $3 a square foot times however many square feet I need. And if he's at $10 a square foot, he either doesn't know what he's doing or he's dishonest, and I can use someone else. There's no fear. There's no apprehension. There's no worry. There's no anxiety. It's a very easy, quick cut decision you can make.
Yeah, and you really got to focus. I use something, I call it the bundle method, where I'll take my whole budget and I'll chop it into like 6 sections. And that way like for construction, I can take my kitchen cabinets. I just go to my kitchen cabinet company and I know exactly what they charge me for the cabinets, the counters, and the install. And so I take those things away from the contractor because I don't want their ambiguity to kind of mess up my budget. So I'll take my whole budget and chop it into 6 really systematic things. Like I have them do all the hard work and the planning, but the easy stuff I'll pull out for myself and just call my dependable subs that will give me that guaranteed price.
And I bet if you get good at this, you could probably go to a contractor and say, here's what I need, here's what I'll pay you, and you already have it broken down. And I bet you a really good percentage of contractors would actually prefer, because they're not good at numbers. That's not what they do. They like to build things and get sawdust in their hair. They don't like to have to use spreadsheets and numbers. And if you could go to them and say, here's what I need, here's what I'm going to pay you, here's what it's going to cost, and they can just look at that and say, oh, I'm going to make $7,000. You got it. And now you don't have to worry about overpaying. You're the only guest I've ever heard that said that. That's really good. For the people who are out there saying, well, how would I ever figure out what a cabinet costs, or how am I going to get these numbers? What James did was he went and worked for another company that was already doing this, and he built his skills serving somebody else, and that was how he got started. He got knowledge, he got confidence, then he did his own thing. That's what I'd recommend if that's what your problem is. Well, I don't know how much that stuff costs. Well, go to work for a company that's already doing this. Go to work for a guy like James. Figure out a way to make it worth his while to hire you. That's the fastest way you're going to learn. Now, one thing I want to know is you're definitely doing big things. You're good at what you do, and you're very humble about it, by the way, which is impressive. So good on you, James.
Thanks.
Tell us a little bit about where you're finding deals, because that's probably the number one objection that I hear from people, other than I'm scared, is there's no deals out there.
Yeah, I hear the same thing. People are like, oh, I'm going to different states. And there's nothing wrong with investing in different states at all. I'm a firm believer you should just invest in everything, especially just learn it before you invest there. I like to play in my own sandbox, which is King, Snow, and Mission Pierce County. I like to be able to drive it. I know my crews, I know my systems, and I do a little bit more complex plans, so I need to have my systems prepared. But, everyone always asks me, like, how do you get these amazing deals? I buy them right off the market 60% of the time. And I buy them off wholesalers. I also own a wholesaling company, so we direct market to sellers as well. But the best deals that I find are right on the market, and they're usually misrepresented by the broker. The broker doesn't quite know what they have going on there, or maybe it was a flipped inspection deal, and the previous buyer's inspection was so gnarly it freaked out the broker. And so we're always combing through the MLS, and I love the ones that are just sitting there on the market. I mean, even my own, like I just flipped my own house basically in Bellevue, and I paid $850 for it. I just sold for 3.1 over a 2.5 year period.
Wait, 3.1?
3.1. And
whoa.
that property that I bought was on the market for 360 days before and I bought it 10 grand off list. Like
wow.
the seller wouldn't budge. No one wanted it. Everyone thought it was a teardown, which it wasn't. And so they were pricing at dirt cost. And I'm like, no, this is a structure I can fix. And I mean, it was a lot of work. I put over $1 million into it too. So it was definitely, it was not easy, but I worked for it. My wife worked for it too, because she dealt with it.
Yeah.
And, but and so those deals are out there as long as you can underwrite and look at them in the correct way. We also bought an apartment building off in Magnolia, which is a really good neighborhood in Seattle. It was sitting there for over 200 days. It flipped 4 times on the inspection. We ended up getting in contract, 300 grand off list because it was the 4th inspection. And we bought it at a 3.2 cap, which is not a good cap rate. I would always tell people, don't buy that.
Yeah.
But then after raising rents, we got it to a 5, which is still okay, right? But that's not my standard. But the thing that everybody missed is we have short platted off 2 lots in the back, and now we're building 2 homes, and it's bringing our whole basis down $950,000 off, because we're building the 2 homes and selling them off. And so it turned our 5.2 cap into, now we're going to be around a 9 cap in Seattle, which is amazing.
That's exactly what I was saying earlier about the 3D, like thinking about real estate in 3 dimensions instead of 2. Like it's exactly what you like. You're like, that's your like magic superpower. If you were like an Avenger, you'd be like the 3D real estate investor.
I'll get it. Yeah. One thing you have to be careful of, though, is don't go too, because we have learned getting into the too big of a project, you kill your return for 2 years.
Yeah.
you need to factor in your dead time on return. And we've had to learn that over the last couple of years. Like, okay, well, maybe we're going to do it this way now, or we're going to do less projects to be more efficient and get the cap rate out. So you can start to over exchange. And so we kind of learned that, and now we're kind of more balanced out.
That's phenomenal.
Corey Namoto talks about that too. They do a lot of flipping in Hawaii, and it's basically the economic concept of opportunity cost.
Yep.
So you can look at it and you can say, well, I'm going to make this much money, but you also have to factor in, well, what else could I be doing with that money during the time, like what you call dead time? That's a really good point. And sometimes when you want to get a deal or you want to brag to your friends about what you did, you can make those decisions without thinking about, well, what if I get to turn that money over 4 times? On flips where maybe I made half as much money, but if you did it 4 times during that period, you would have made twice as much in the end. So that's a very good point you're bringing up, unless you can get access to other capital so that while your capital's tied up, you can still do deals with someone else's.
Yeah. And it's finding deals on the MLS is really looking for that broker that doesn't know what they're selling, but also looking for that next market that's still depreciated, that path of progress. So those condos I bought originally, I ended up 1031 exchanging those into a house in Suncadia, Washington, which is kind of like a resort town, because I saw my condos go way up in value, and I'm like, okay, these things are at the peak of a market. I need to sell that and maximize my equity. And I 1031 exchanged it into a vacation rental, which was totally random, but it brought in, they were renting for $1,100 a night. And then I liked that for upside because I was buying it below replacement cost. They spent $400 a foot building these houses, and I was buying at $270 a foot. And so I saw the runway there, and so it's buying and holds not just about your income you collect. It's about like placing your money in markets for a couple years and then repositioning it when the market starts cooling down. And so because that's how you can hyper accelerate your appreciation and your return by buying it. So you're always increasing your cash flow, but also increasing your equity position, the whole BRRRR method, and then taking that equity and putting that equity to use.
So you're not I'm going to buy it, hold it for the next 50 years. You're always looking, how do I get a better return on my equity that's there?
That's in this kind of market, I think I personally think I have to be, because, right now markets in Seattle, there's a lot of things at peak pricing, in my opinion. And, I look at, okay, what's the upside? Am I going to get that much more in rent? The asset maybe has appreciated 25%. And then if I really like the building and it's just turnkey and I don't want to mess with it, then we'll leave it alone. Then I want to always increase my position. Like, being an investor is my full-time job. So if it just takes me a little bit more work than to roll it over, I'll switch it over there. So, even the Suncadia property, when I bought that, I was like, oh, I'm going to keep this forever. I love it. I get a vacation there. And then it went up $350,000 in value.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, that's now going to go down, because then I also saw a record number of building permits pulled there. And so I'm not only just looking at my asset, I'm looking at what's going around my asset. And so if I'm seeing a bunch of building permits pulled around one of my assets, that means there's going to be an oversupply, which is going to bring my value down, and which also could bring my rent income down. And so then I ended up selling that and going back into a traditional investment from there. But usually I keep them for minimum 2 years. There's some in me and Will's portfolio, there's property like that 60 room rooming house. We're going to keep that because that's a lot of work and it's a high income.
Yeah.
And that's just going to be a staple property for us. But other ones, I'll always, if I can increase my position, I'm always going to increase my position, because I'm not retired yet. So that's my job, is to always increase my investment position.
Well, I talk about that in long distance real estate investing, that return on equity is a metric you need to learn and understand. Because when you bought the property, let's say you're getting a 10% return and rents have gone up and now you're getting a 15% return. And it's easy to say, wow, I'm crushing it, I'm doing so good. But your property has increased in value so much that the return on your equity is 1 or 2%. And if you were to reinvest that money, you were getting a 3% return. Now you're getting a 15% return on something new. You 5x your cash flow. And you have the value add opportunity that comes from buying a new property and turning it around. Like I'm sure you would say, James, from the deals you're doing, the money that you make, the equity that you build, comes primarily from buying underperforming assets and fixing them up, making them worth more. It's that initial, I bought it cheap, I fixed it up, where most of your wealth comes from. And then the rest is where we just let it go and the cash flow comes in. But make sure your equity is working for you. Look how hard you're working at what you're doing. You can't let your money not work when you're working this hard. And you understand that, and that's exactly why you're building wealth so fast. Is you're buying it, you're making it worth a whole lot more, and then you're saying, well, is this equity better spent sitting in this property, or can I get more somewhere else, and then moving it into a new asset class? And you combine that with everything you know about real estate, zoning laws, how to buy deals off the MLS, making a hostel, like all the stuff you're talking about, and you're going to accelerate your returns quite a bit.
Yeah, and it's really just comes down to timing too. It's because right now the market is still appreciating in a lot of neighborhoods, especially in Washington. And so for me, I'll probably stop exchanging as much once the market kind of flatlines out. And the other thing I pay attention to when I'm trading around is bank rates are really low right now. So it's easy for me to trade around. But once rates creep up, which they will eventually, it doesn't make it as worth your while to trade around a property, because now you're also trading. You may be trading into a better discounted asset, but your bank financing can be 2 points higher. And so there's all these things outside the box that you got to pay attention to. And so for me, the last 5 years, I've seen what's going on in the market. So I've been doing all my trades. But at the end of the day, when everything stops and I'm going to settle down, I'll be locked in with low rates, and I'll always increase my equity and cash flow position. And so, and if I can't get a low rate and I'm not increasing my cash flow position, then I'm not going to sell that asset.
Once you've got like a rooming house with 60 doors and you've got a total of 250 doors in your portfolio, and a lot of that is not just an individual house that one property manager is doing. It's a property with a whole bunch of doors in it. How are you structured to collect those rents, make sure your bookkeeping gets done? I'm sure you're not making sure all 60 rooms are full in your rooming house. How have you delegated that responsibility to other people?
So we used to use property managers, and property managers are a good way to go. They can cost quite a bit. And, once you get to a certain portfolio, we actually have 2 full-time leasing people on our staff now. And so we just have it all in-house. Accounting's all done in-house. We use the Yardi system for collecting rents. And, and so it just really comes down to, once you always want to analyze your portfolio, what your expense is. And if, property management, usually we can get it for about 5 to 6% locally if you're giving them a lot of business. So we run our 5 to 6% cost. And then, at that point, it makes a lot, it's half the price to have 2 full-time salary people. And in addition to, we also can control the maintenance cost, because we want to do our own maintenance because we're thrifty. Not bad property management.
Lazy property managers that send the first handyman they find that charges 3 times what your guy would pay. That's your biggest expense with single family housing.
Yeah, that's how I pull my hair out. I'm like, you just spent how much on a toilet? Like, I just can't. I still have that cheap side to me where I'm like, no, I'm not paying that. Just putting together the right systems, and that's where you have to look at your portfolio and go, okay, well, how much time do I have? If I'm a Microsoft guy, I'm probably still going to use property management because I'm not a full-time investor at that point. Yep. And so for me, like, being a full-time investor is my business. So we had to hire and staff accordingly.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And a lot of real estate, what I found is, like, if you can get to that certain level, there is that level, like at 20 units, it might not be worth it. That you can't hire someone. I mean, it's not worth it to hire someone in-house to run that. At 30 units, it might not be worth it. You're still doing it yourself. But there gets to be this point, maybe it's at 100 units, maybe at 200, where you can bring that in-house and then lower all your costs. So it's almost like, I'm looking at this with mobile home parks right now and with other, apartment complexes. What number do I need to get to where everything becomes cheaper at that point because of the economies of scale? So, like, I'm not saying I'm going to go out and buy bad deals, but what I can look forward to is, hey, I can drop that property management cost from 7% down to 3% once I get over 200 units, because then I'm going to bring it all in house or something. It's just another interesting way to look at a kind of a 3-dimensional deal.
And you always just want to perfect your return, especially if you're in a stabilization period where you're like, okay, I'm making 10%. Can I get it to 11 by doing nothing?
Yeah,
or by changing things, not doing nothing, but changing things around.
Yeah, definitely. Well, hey, I want to move us along to the next segment of the show and dive deeper into one of your particular deals. So it's time for the Deal Deep Dive. All right, the Deal Deep Dive. This is the part of the show where we dive deep into one deal that you've done and ask a series of questions about it. So let's see. You got a property in mind then before I ask the questions?
Yeah. I got one I just closed on. I'm about ready to list one of them too. It's kind of a flip rental pseudo.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, that's the first question. What kind of property is this? Is it multifamily, single family, and then where is it?
So it's in Olympic Hills in Seattle, Washington, which is about 10 miles north of downtown.
Okay.
So it's a good transitional neighborhood, borders with shoreline. It's actually a single family purchase where I purchased 3 single family houses. And then it also had a detached 1,000 square foot ADU in the back and a detached 3-car garage in the back as well.
Okay. Wow.
But yeah, it was a deal I bought off a builder that needed cash.
So 3 single family houses and a 1,000 square foot ADU, like an extra unit. So it's almost like 4 houses, but not really, right?
Yeah, it was the ADU is bootlegged into one of them, but yes.
Yep, okay.
Yeah. So basically 3.5 houses and a big garage.
All right.
Yeah,
And
it's good for toys. So
That's awesome.
You said you found it from a builder. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So, one good thing about buying properties in Seattle for so long is people kind of know us that if we give them their word, we're going to close on it. And so there was a builder, a lot of people are doing, like we've been talking about, 1031 exchanging, and a builder kind of got caught and needed to sell off some properties. And but he's also a very experienced guy. He wasn't going to give them away. So, we came to terms, and I ended up buying these properties. It was a combined purchase of $1.56 million for 3 houses. And he had been shopping it actually for like 60 days before he found me to buy it. And the reason being is a lot of people just said no, because on a cap rate basis, there were rentals for them. It was like a 4 cap on houses in Seattle, which isn't very good. And then the equity position, I paid basically $540 per house, and they're worth $699 to $750. So there wasn't that big of a discount for a flip either.
Yeah.
And so when he ran it by me originally, I was like, nah, I'm not really into this, but I went and drove it and took a look at it. I was like, oh, okay, no, I think I can come up with a plan here, because, partially what he did too is he built 3 houses, built that ADU in the back, built a garage in the back, and they were all crossed all over property lines. And so like the house had the garage, but you couldn't get to it, and it was just kind of a mess. And so kind of what I kind of dug into, I was like, well, I really like this property with the ADU in the garage, because, it will rent out, for that front house will rent out for $3,500. The ADU will rent out for about $1,900. And then I can rent the garage out for $200 or $100 per bay. So, there was a combined rent of around $6,000 a month on this property. But the rest of the properties were kind of these like drag downs. And then even at the purchase of $550 and the renovation, I'm like, this still isn't that good of a cap rate. So what it ended up doing was looking at 2 of the properties and running the flip numbers on them. And because they were pretty cosmetic, what, I'm in the process of doing, I'm listing one this week, is, selling off 2 of the property. I short platted them, boundary line to adjust everything around to where the one property now had the house, the ADU, and the garage. And I'm flipping the 2 houses to take my basis down on that property. And by flipping the 2 houses, I'm actually generating about $110 in income there, which is going to take my $550 purchase on that one building, and it brings it down to $440, which is it ends up being a payment of $2,400 a month, taxes and insurance included, which is now going to bring me in $6,000 a month in income. So
That's awesome.
I have no money in the deal. Once I'm done flipping them, I'll have no money in the deal and generating about $2,500 to $3,000 a month. Plus, I get to stick all my crap in the garage. So
That's amazing. So okay, let me dive in a little bit. I was going to ask him, did you just pay what he wanted? 1.56. That what you ended up coming at, or did you negotiate?
First I was going to tell him $500 a house, and then I drove it and kind of looked at it. And I was like, oh no, I can pay this. And then like I wanted to realize it before someone else realized what they could do with it. I think everyone kind of blew by it. Because there's houses right by that for sale for $575 dated. So it didn't look like there was a lot of discount on the houses. Yeah. And so, for me, I wanted to kind of, naturally, I always like to grind people down, but at the same time, I don't want to lose a good deal.
Sure. Yeah.
And if I can make an extra $2,000 a month and get storage for free, I'm going to, I would be kicking myself a year down the road. The other thing that also passed while I was in contract on this is that new ADU rule in the back, to where now I can actually condo off that back house, and if I ever want to. And so now the combined value is worth like over $1 million, and I'm only going to owe $450 on it.
Oh, I didn't know Seattle had that. I know we have it out here in Hawaii where you can condo out your ADU and separate it. I didn't know Seattle has that. That's cool.
You can't. It's been around for a while. There's a trick to it. So maybe I can explain the trick to you later.
That's cool.
About going through the county. But so like at first I was like, no, I'm not really into this. I didn't really like the street. It was surrounded by apartment buildings. So I was like, yeah, the upside of the houses are really there. But then once I did all the math on it, I was like, oh no, this is going to work. And so, I was paying them a little bit more of a premium on it, how I looked at it. So because I was paying him a premium, I got cheaper financing lined up right away. He let me conventionally finance them all. So it saved me all my hard money and debt cost.
Okay.
And that was my thing to him. He wanted cash. And I said, well, hey, I'm going to pay you what you want, but you got to give me 40 days to close these.
Yep.
And by doing that, it saved me about $60,000 in hard money cost on there. And so like I was just by getting the 45, I gave him what he wanted. Instead of chasing, trying to get him down $60,000, I just gave him what he wanted and financed the deal in a different way.
That's
so
awesome.
How did you explain how you financed it, how you funded it?
So I funded it with, I actually really like working with credit unions and local banks, especially once you have more than 8 properties financed in your name. And as an investor, I'm a firm believer you should go meet with all those people, get them comfortable with your processes. And once you get that, you can actually get pretty good financing done quickly and very low. I mean, it's not very hard. And my books are very complex. There's a lot of different companies feeding into each other with a lot of different write-offs. And so I'm a mortgage guy's worst nightmare when it comes on paper. And, but they, I work with Alaska Credit Union on these ones. They were quick, they fast. And, because of the plan, I explained to them my plan too and what I was doing. And so I was able to just put 10% down on all those properties as well, which usually you got to put 20% down. But after I showed them the income potential and what my plan was, they actually got it down to 10% for me.
That's awesome. That's just another reason why, getting to know those local community banks, credit unions, really, really smart idea. Instead of just going to the big, national banks.
Yeah, big national banks, they have different people making the calls and they don't know us. And so I've always had more luck with local banks.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Well, what about so at the end of the day, you're going to, you got it with 10% down, but are you going to refinance out now once you sell off those 2 properties? Is that the plan, or how does that work from a title standpoint?
I got a really good rate on the one. And so what I'm doing is the 2 flips are going to generate me about $120,000 in cash off.
Okay.
And so after taxes, it actually comes down to $80,000, which is the down payment for the one house. It's actually, at the end of the day, I'm plus $30,000 in my pocket and I'm walking with $2,000 a month in cash flow.
That's awesome.
And I locked in it was because rates dropped at that time. I think I'm at 4.65 on a 30-year fixed rate. Because this one I do plan on keeping for a while.
Yeah.
Because I need the garage. So it fits really well for my construction company. I can put tons of stuff in and it rents out. So, but for now I plan on keeping this one for a while. But after everything, and that's when I really realized it was a really good deal because I could flip the other 2 houses, basically get all my down payment back plus $20,000 and collect $2,000 a month. That's
so cool. That's amazing. So what, I'll take the last question unless David, you want it. Lessons learned. All right. What's the lessons learned? What have you learned on this project that you could share or that you made an impact on you?
The biggest lesson I learned on this was actually when I did when I was purchasing the property, part of it was I was going to do all the easements to get rid of the title issues with the buildings on different property lines. So originally what I did is I just went in and did an easement and recorded an easement for access. And so it cost me $3,000 to do, $3,000 to $4,000, had to survey it out. Got it all done, closed on the deal, and I was about ready to list the property 3 weeks ago, one of them, to get my cash back. And I screwed up. I didn't think about my plan of possibly condoing off the house down the road, because to do it that way, I can't do it with the easement I recorded, and I need to do a boundary line adjustment.
Okay.
So I did my first plan was too rushed. And so now what I had to do is unrecord the easement, go in for the boundary line adjustment. And what it's done is it's made me sit on the middle house that I'm selling for another month, which is a loss of $3,000 at that point.
Sure.
But it would have been a lot more detrimental actually if I didn't do it and I sold the house and then I couldn't condo it later because it's kind of specific rules. So, it's just making sure, sometimes speed isn't your best friend, right? Don't rush into that project and just try to get things done. Because my goal was to get that one flipped in 45 days, get my money back, and then move on to the next deal. and I should have slowed it down because it probably would have saved me $6-7 at the end of the day. But kind of wasted money. Plus, it was just sitting there.
Wow, that was a phenomenal story, though. Very, very cool. And yeah, good luck on that project. I'm curious. That's so cool. I love, again, it's just over and over and over. This theme today just keeps coming up of like just finding different creative ways, not necessarily to finance a deal, even though that was creative as well, but to put together something that might not be a deal and how to turn it into a deal. We just keep coming back to that. And I love that. That's your superpower. So yeah, keep that up.
We call it inventing returns. Like, you can't get a cap rate of 5 or more than, or, you get a 4.5 to 5 cap in Seattle. So we're not okay with that, but we like the area. So we have to invent our own returns to get it to where, like, to meet our minimum standards.
Yeah. It's like David and I always talk about how today's market, you don't really find good deals anymore. It's not 2012 or 2011 anymore. Today you make good deals. Like you make them by being creative. And that's exactly what you've done. So very, very cool. Well, before we get out of here, let's go over to the next segment of the show. It's time for our fire round.
It's time for the fire round.
All right, time for the world famous fire round. Of course, these questions come direct out of the BiggerPockets forums, which you can visit. Everybody can go hang out there at biggerpockets.com/forums. Totally free. So let's do it. Some people got to ask some questions of James here. Number one, Hector from Overland Park, Kansas said, I've got no cash, but I do have an investor willing to fund my first flip. What do I get out of it? What does he get out of it? What's the best way to approach him and form a relationship that can continue into the future? What advice you got for Hector?
Well, Hector, just like I did my first one, instead of bringing in an equity partner, I just paid him like a lender because for me, it was about getting that first deal in my name. And so you find that really good deal and what you want to do is you want to go, or what I did is I went to my investor with a plan of, hey, I'm going to buy this. You're going to do my second for me. I'm going to pay you this return. And sometimes it makes more sense to overpay that person on a return to get the deal in your name. And then get set up to get him taken out with a plan give him the plan to get your money back. And then so just pay a little bit more for your financing rather than giving up equity on your first rental. That's just where I came from. I wanted to start building my own portfolio, but I offered to give him better loan terms in a safe loan rather than giving him equity in the deal.
All right.
Beautiful.
Very cool.
All right. Question number 2. I love hearing success stories on the podcast, but I'm wondering if you can share a deal gone wrong. Why did it fail? Bad location? Did you overpay? Bad property management, etc.?
I have more bad deal. I have tons and tons of bad deal stories. And you have to be, that's how you learn in investing. And, well, I guess going back when I was new, biggest mistake I made was jumping from buying condos to buying a really big fixer house in the middle of nowhere. And I had no systems for construction. I'd only done carpet paint, but it was this amazing deal. I was paying like 40 cents on the dollar for, and I just got smoked on this deal. Like time and materials, it went 6 months over timeline. And then during that 6 month, 2008 happened and the market crashed. And, and so I was 3 times the amount of budget, 3 times over the timeline, lost all my cash. And that's because I was buying what I didn't know how to buy. And so as an investor, I won't buy unless I have a process somewhat figured out for it, because that's how you can really get your butt kicked. I also, same time, I bought a commercial building during that time, which I don't buy commercial office space is what I learned. And I learned that because we bought a really cheap building in a not that good location, but it was this amazing, we were paid like $100 a square foot for this office building. But it doesn't matter if no one wants to rent it in a bad location. Yep. And so it sat vacant, and we actually had to move our whole business down there in the market crash and occupy it. And then get it leased up. And that's actually how we learned condoing things off. We condoed out little sections and leased it up and then moved out. But it always comes down to not buying the right deal or not buying what you don't know.
Yep. I had a mentor tell me early on in my career, like very, very early, said, you can go broke buying good deals.
Yes.
I didn't fully understand what he meant back then, but I completely understand it today.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just because it's cheap doesn't mean, or just because you think it's a good deal doesn't mean you should buy it. Number 3, Adam from Roxbury, Connecticut said, my tenant wants to put in a ceiling fan in the unit he's renting. He said he would buy the fan and his brother, who's an electrician, would do all the wiring and install it for free. Should I allow him to do that, or any advice on how I should go about this?
Personally, I wouldn't mind if a tenant improved mine, but I also want to make sure it's my building, that they get a permit, it's inspected, and you don't want the liability of that thing possibly catching on fire because he had his brother do it. And personally, I don't really talk to my tenants because I'm a softie.
Yeah.
And so I'll just usually approve it. So they go through, usually my property management team will say no. And then if they ask me, I'll probably say yes, but get a permit.
That's you
That's
sound
funny.
eerily like my best friend in real estate.
Are you talking about me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't, tenants can't ask me things because I will always say yes because I'm a softie as well. And so I created systems of people who say no for me so I don't have to.
It's insulation. That's exactly
I've lost
what
lots
you
of
need.
rent because I let people slide because they're a mom or whatever it is.
Yep.
Me
too.
It hurts.
All right.
Right
Next
there.
question. From Mike Nelson in Miami. Does anyone have any tips to get hard money lenders to fund your deals? A little about me. I have a background in construction. I've done one flip, which was a big success. I also know a couple of good listing agents. Thank you.
For me, getting my first capital was really just so I got my first loan through a local lender. They just wanted 20% down. And so for me, it was really finding the 20% down was the harder part. And so I just had to make sure every property that I presented that person with had a really detailed out plan, not just construction, but I covered all different angles. Like, hey, if I'm going to flip this property, here's my backup plan in case this doesn't flip. I'm fully pre-qualified. I can get a loan for this amount. So I always wanted to give them a really good exit strategy on it. If you're doing a flip, one other thing you can do that's worked well for me, especially in the beginning, was bringing in an equity lender at that point. That's where I will bring in an equity lender just to build my track record because I really wanted to have 10 to 20 deals under my plate so we could kind of get it ramped up. But I didn't have the 20% down for all these deals. And so I would give him way more equity in the first couple because then they saw it was a little bit less risky and then they wanted to be involved again. And I actually gave him less equity as time went on. So it went from going 50% to 25% to then just borrowing money at that point. And then as a first-time flipper, the most important thing I can tell you is don't spend your profits. Save your profit. It's really easy to get your first check and just blow it.
Yep.
Save it because then you don't have to bring in those equity partners. It saves you so much money down the road.
That's terrific advice. Really, really good. Yeah, I know a lot of people, they flip a house. I mean, my very first flip I ever did, I took the money and I paid for my wedding, which wasn't a bad use of the money, but I didn't have anything after that. I was like, well, that went, now that's gone. And now I'm broke. And so do
you feel like a princess for the day though?
I did. I felt like a princess for the day.
That's all that matters.
It was all worth it. It was all worth it. All right. That was great. That was great answers of the fire round. And now let's get to the last segment of the show. It's time for our Famous Four. All right, let's get to the Famous Four. Number one, James, do you have a favorite real estate related book?
Ooh. You know what? My favorite book that anyone's ever given me is not that real estate. It's How Not to Be a Dick.
That's a book?
That's a book. I got it in my drawer right here.
That's funny.
My employee gave it to me because she said I was too rough on
Brandon's going to send me that now.
Yeah, I'm going to send everyone that copy.
I started with Rich Dad Poor Dad way back in the day. It was just it was the first book that someone gave me when I was 21, and most of the reading I do is actually more economics now and conditions than actual strategy because my strategy is based on market conditions than anything else.
It sounds like that book might be the 2019 version of How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Do you have that one? We can trade. I'll trade it out.
There's
more and more books PC name.
Yeah, there's more and more new books with the really titles that are
there's a dozen books with the F word in the bookstores right now.
Subtle art,
Target.
The subtle art of not giving a F.
Yeah, that was the first one I think, and now there's a dozen of them. I see it every time I go any bookstore. Yeah.
I thought they were joke books, but they're actually real published, actual edited, legit books to sell a lot of copies.
The Subtle Art was actually a fantastic book.
See, I never would have thought so. I would have thought it was a bachelor gift or something.
That's funny.
Subtle Art.
Yeah, it's called the subtle art of not giving an F, and then they block out the F word.
I like it.
It'll make a great compliment to the book you just mentioned, James.
Yes.
You need to get it.
We can start a book club.
Yeah. All right. I'm still having trouble concentrating because I'm picturing Brandon in a wedding dress at his wedding. All 6'5" of them, bearded up, like looking perfect. And
I only had a goatee at the time, so it's okay. Just not quite. It was goatee Brandon, not beardy Brandon.
Poor Heather. That woman is an angel.
Yes.
All right. Next question. What is your favorite business book?
My favorite business book that I read, and it was actually called The Sales Bible. And, as a young salesperson, like I really wanted to learn on how to handle objections because I was trying to negotiate a good deal. It all starts with a good deal, right? Mm-hmm. And so that helped me organize all my, how I did sales, my follow-up methods, because, following up is the biggest part of sales. And it taught you how to do objections, follow-up method. And I remember I read that book like 5 times in my first year because I was getting nowhere. And it just kept kind of helping me through.
That's a nugget. This follow-up is where it's at. People, they don't realize that. They send one round of direct mail letters and they don't get a reply. And like, that didn't work. I had a new agent on my team that went door knocking the other day. And she's like, I've been door knocking twice in a row and I haven't found one person to sell their house. It's like, what are the odds that the moment you knock on their door, they're going to have been, I do want to sell. You have to keep doing it. That's the whole point, is you get a relationship you build and then eventually that starts to feed you. But I see so many people that start off on that journey of lead generation, looking for leads, and then they only hit somebody once. It's like you're looking for a tree that will fall down with one swing of the axe. That's what you're looking for. You have to keep chopping at it, eventually it'll go down. So that's very good.
I used to knock 30 doors a day, 5 days a week. That was my minimum.
Wow.
But I bet a lot of those deals did not come from the one door. They were consistently talking to the same people and letting them know you were there and saying, hey, I want to buy your house, right?
Yeah, and then just you mark the hot leads. You'd be like, oh, this one's beat up, this one's neglected, and then those ones I would go back to weekly.
You make it a funnel.
And you bring them gifts. You can bring them all sorts, like whatever thing they liked, I was going to bring them. Like whether it was a beer or cigarettes or food or whatever it was, I'd drop by and bring it to them.
I think we need to have you write a book, man. This is some really, really good stuff.
This is awesome.
Yeah, how to buy real estate without being a beep. All right. Next question. What are some of your hobbies?
I'm a big, so I like boating a lot. I can spend a lot of time out in the water. My kids are top priority for me. So anything kid related on the weekends, I love hanging out with my kids. And then I'm just kind of a fitness person in general. Like I'm a firm believer, if my body feels good, my mind works better. So anything active, like if it's wakeboarding or working out, like I said, I'm relocating to California a little bit just to be out in the sun. I learn surfing, just anything active.
That's awesome.
And Seahawks football. I'm a huge Seahawks football fan.
So are you going to change when you move down to California?
Not.
Okay.
Not flying back for every game.
Are you really?
Oh, yeah. I usually go to about 4 or 5 away games, too. I don't do much, but football is my thing. Football and real estate.
There you go. That's cool. I went to the Seahawks-Vikings game that was outside in Minnesota. What was that, 3 or 4 years ago? Like when it was like 30 below. Yeah, I flew into Minnesota. I mean, I don't even go to games ever. That was my first Seahawks game ever. But Minnesota was my team growing up, and it was a big game, right? So I flew in, and it was the coldest.
Is there anything in the world that's fun at 30 degrees below zero or whatever? Right? Like, doesn't matter what you're doing at that temperature. Is it fun?
Yeah.
It was a better day than Blair Walsh, though.
That is true.
That guy, poor guy.
Poor guy. That was a rough day for him. All right, number 4. What do you believe sets apart successful real estate investors from all those who give up, fail, or never get started?
I think the biggest thing you can have as an investor is having integrity and doing what you say you're going to do. And that has gotten me so much deal flow over the years, like building that representation and then telling, if I'm going to do something, I tell it to them and I'm going to stick to that no matter what. And that reputation alone gets me so many people coming to me to bring me stuff because they know if I tell it to them, and always give them logic with my answer, give them logic. And then I just, and I've bought in properties that I told yes on that I ended up not really wanting to buy. And I did it just to keep the relationship going. But yeah, those, a lot of times people go for like these like specialty, like, as a real estate investor, like get a niche, do these things, but core values will always make you stand apart.
Makes sense.
I agree. I've done the very same thing and it always comes back.
Yep.
And I think Josh Dorkin was actually a big proponent of that as well. Just, you have to be a person of your word. And if you're not going to be in business long. That's definitely been the case.
Yeah.
All right. Well, James, I have thoroughly enjoyed this. I had no idea that you were this smart. because you, like I said, you're a very humble guy. You don't come across like a know-it-all, but the more you talked, I'm like, oh my gosh, this dude's got it together. Got a really good guest here. For people that want to find out more about you and learn to be you, where can they find out more about you?
Well, my social media is so actually I will do daily, or not daily, but weekly videos of me visiting sites, looking at things. My Instagram handle is JDain, JDAIN Flips, FLIPS, or our company website is www.heatondainard.com, HEATONDAINARD.com. And that kind of, and we do a bunch of different, just investor tool helping things there. So it's all free. And our goal is just to always get back to the investment community, and it pays back. So
it's great. I love it. Love it. Super cool. And of course, we'll have links to all that at the show notes, biggerpockets.com/show 337. You can check it out there. I'll have links to all those good things, including your social media and all that. So definitely follow James, check him out, check out his website. And with that, I guess we'll get out of here. David Green, you want to take us out?
This has been fantastic. He is JDain Flips. Brandon is Beardy Brandon. I am David Green 24. Follow us on Instagram to keep up with our journeys. Thank you very much, James. This has been an awesome episode. And this is David Green for Brandon, the beautiful bride Turner, signing off.
You're listening to Bigger Pockets Radio, simplifying real estate for investors large and small. If you're here looking to learn about real estate investing without all the hype, you're in the right place. Be sure to join the millions of others who have benefited from BiggerPockets.com, your home for real estate investing online.